Hi folks, today we're going to go over how to assemble your new Graffiti X. So we put this video together for all of our independent bike dealers and mobile bike mechanics out there that are going through the assembly of this bike. If you're a person who's just received this at your home and you've never assembled a bike before, or you've maybe only done it once before, this is probably not the right task for you to be taking on, and we do highly encourage you to bring in a professional mechanic or assembler, or go to your local bike shop to help you assemble this bike. This is a very fast e-bike, and it's important that it's assembled properly for safe usage. So please consider whether or not you have the skills before you take this on. Now let's get into the video. Okay, so we've got our bike unpacked now. You've taken all the packaging off of it, and this is what we should have. We should have our bike with the battery installed here. And then from the other box, we've got our pedals. We've got our two wheels here, the back wheel and the front wheel, okay? And then tools that you're gonna need for this installation here is going to be a torque wrench with a 7/8 size socket for the rear axle nuts. You're going to want a shock pump, and you're going to see this in a moment. This is for putting the correct pressure in your front shock and getting it set for your rider weight. You're going to want a 15mm wrench and a 10mm wrench. You're going to want an assortment of hex wrenches. So a multi-tool can work, but you need one big enough for the front axle. But sometimes the spaces that are harder to get into, it's easier to have the smaller hex wrenches. Definitely a Phillips head screwdriver. You don't necessarily need a flathead screwdriver, but handy to have around. And then some clippers for zip ties. And then you need 4 zip ties as well. That's going to be for the motor wire at the back. Okay, so we'll get going from there. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to prep the frame for the assembly. And a couple things that are quite handy. Well, the first thing that's quite handy is just taking the battery off. So I'm going to remove the power cable here. There's a button here that helps to, that unlocks it to pull it off. So you've got to push this button in while you pull that out. And then around the other side, you're going to want to use one of your keys. Now, if you haven't found your keys yet, they're usually zip tied to the headlight, either on one side of the bracket or the other. So take a look at there to see if you manage to clip those off while you were taking it off. So I'm going to unlock the battery, and there's a set screw underneath that I'm going to loosen all the way, okay? And then from this side at the back, okay, I'm just going to give it a little bit of a push, okay? And it should come free. And then I'm going to pick it up, tilt it forward, and pick it out of the frame. Okay, and we're going to put that to the side for later. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take off the side panels off of both sides. So using our screwdriver, it's going to take these off. Now it's not going to come off right away because there's actually a plastic piece in behind here. And I'm going to show you what that looks like because I've already taken one off. Okay, so you'll notice here that this has, it just compresses to come out, okay? So it's sitting there against this lip. So what you're going to want to do, as soon as you've taken these 2 screws out, you're going to want to get something flat, like your screwdriver, or something else like it, and push from the back, and pushing it straight, you're going to push it out, okay? and then that's going to pop these side panels off. Make sure you're pushing straight and you're not sort of like pushing pressure to the side so you don't break this piece when you're taking it off. Okay, so we're going to do that to both sides. Now that we've got the side panels off of both sides, we're just going to take the rear brake off. Now I've loosened this a little bit ahead of time, but you're just going to take these two bolts out, this one here and this one here. Okay, we're going to take them all the way out. And what you need to do is be mindful of if there's any spacers. So if you can see here, there's some spacers in the back one. So when we take this off, there's none on the front, but there's spacers on the back one here. So we want to make sure that we know where those are. So if you want to remember, it's easiest to put that back on just the way that it was before. Okay, and now our frame is sort of prepped for the assembly. Now the first thing that we're going to do before we put the handlebar on, which is going to be the next step, is to set the pressure in your front shock. So I'm going to use my shock pump. I'm going to take the air valve off. Now note, you can't do this with a standard bike pump because the pressure is much different, and a bike pump usually doesn't fit down into this space. So I'm going to dial this in. Okay, and this is set at 100 right now. Out of the factory, they're usually about 90 to 100. On the back of the fork leg here, get down so you can see it here, there's recommended pressures for your weight. Okay, I'm 210 pounds, so I'm going to put about 140 psi into this, right? And you can see where you should go. And as it says, definitely don't go over 200 psi, but much beyond kind of 160, and it doesn't really move anyway. So I'm just going to pump this up. Okay, there I am at about 140. This is not going to be something that you're going to do very often. You sort of set it once, and you're going to come back and you're going to recheck it, once every 6 months, but definitely not something that you're going to be doing often. Now we're going to set the front handlebar on, so we're going to take out these bolts here. And again, I've pre-loosened these so that it's a little bit faster in the video. Put those to the side. Okay. And then I'm just going to take my handlebar and I'm going to rest it in place. Now, some of you with the newer model bikes, we've got the taller handlebar now. The procedure is still the same. It's just we've got this crossbar that's going on. Okay. But we're just going to put these in place over top. And then we'll start to tighten this down. Now what you shouldn't do is tighten one all the way down first. What I'm going to do is I'm basically just going to seat them so I'll get them close to tight. Because this gap here doesn't completely close over the handlebar. So if you tighten one all the way, it'll end up just being sort of crooked and not in line. See? Okay, and we're going to set the angle of our handlebar when we're finished the bike. We're just going to get it on for now. Okay. All I'm doing is I'm loosening this up because I see that this is not quite straight here. So I'm just straightening it a little bit so that the gap on either side is closer to the same. Okay, and I haven't got it significantly tight right now, and then all you want to do is make sure that your display is sort of out of the way, because we're now going to flip this over and we're going to put it on its handlebar so that we've got the bike upside down and so that it's easier for us to install the wheels. We can see that our bike is now upside down here and we're ready to start putting on the wheels. So we're going to start with the front wheel first, and then we're going to move to the back wheel. Starting with the front wheel, we're going to have to take the axle off. Okay, and the first thing that you need to do is make sure that you've loosened these bolts. Okay, again, I've loosened these ahead of time, but these clamp on the axle and prevent the axle from sliding out. So if these things are too tight, we're not going to be able to get the axle out. Now we're going to use our large hex tool just to start undoing it from the other side. There's a possibility you may need a rubber mallet to help sort of encourage this to get started. But we've got this axle out and we're ready now to put in the front wheel. Okay, I've got my front wheel here, and my brake disc is here on my left hand side, and that's where the brake caliper is. Okay, and I've checked ahead of time here where I can feed the axle in and it feeds into the other side, right? So it's a clear shot straight through. So I shouldn't have any alignment issues when I put in the wheel. Okay, I'm going to slide this into place. I'm going to watch to see that it's gone into the disc. The rotor's gone into the caliper there. Okay. Now I'm just going to feed the axle through to the other side. Okay, oops. You can see we've come in here and we've gone a little too far. Okay. There. Should be able to start screwing it through. Okay, you can see it's being sucked through. See it coming to the other side. Now you'll notice the shape of the end of the axle. We're going to line that up for where the bolt is. We're just going to go in the rest of the way. Okay, we're going to tighten that down. It doesn't need to be too crazy tight, okay, because we've also got these clamps going into the axle there. Okay, so the next thing is we're just going to tighten those up. Okay, so I'm going to tighten all 4 of these screws here. Like this. Okay, and I'm going to check these just to make sure that we've got them good and tight. Because tightening one actually can loosen up the next. So we're just going to keep going back and forth until we feel that we've got them all tight. Now you can see that sounds really clean of the disc running through the caliper, but in our last step we're going to adjust the caliper anyway. This one doesn't need to be adjusted. We're going to show you how to do that. The back wheel is going to have some hardware with it, right? We're going to have these rear axle nut protectors, the axle nuts themselves, and then the torque arms, which are in a couple different component parts. Okay, so we're going to want to take all these off and save them, put them down in a place where we're going to be able to grab them for later. But get them off both sides, and we'll get this rear wheel positioned. We've got our motor ready to put in. We're going to line up the brake disc here on the right side. That's where this is going to go. We're going to make sure that the caliper is out of the way, so I'm just going to put this on the other side of the spring here. Okay, so I can move that afterwards. We're going to make sure that the belt is in the right place. So I've placed the belt on the front cog, and I've tracked it back, and I've just made sure that this is sort of out of the way. This is going to help me put the belt on afterwards, so that the belt is sort of in the right place that it needs to be. And then I've got the motor wire facing the right way, right? So we don't want it facing down. We want it facing up towards us right now. And that also helps position these axle flats on either side so that they're facing straight to go on. I do have a spacer on this side, which fits between the back dropout and the wheel. So we want to make sure that's still on there. Okay. I'm just going to slide that in. Okay. And there we go, we're on. Okay. And then the belt I can just basically flip over and put on the inside here. Okay. And we're now ready to put on the torque arms on either side. So I've grabbed my torque arms. Okay. It's possible that you may need to loosen these off. Okay. And that's fine. You can loosen these all the way out to the ends of here. If needed with the 10mm wrench. But then we're just going to slide these on. Okay. And you'll notice that there's a different sizing for them. So they only fit the side that they are meant to be on. Okay. So I can slide these on. You need to have this slid further back in order to do that. Okay. Now we're going to take the 4 small screws. Okay. Those are these screws here. And we're going to screw these into the back of the frame here. Okay. So we're going to get all these done. It's just a small hex wrench that's going to put them all in. So do all 4 of them now. These are all tight now. I'm just going to check them all. Okay. Now you don't have to worry about the belt tension. So I'm going to put the belt on. The way that we usually do that is I slightly take it off the front, or just take it off the front. I put it on the back. Okay. Then I get it started on the front, and I just rotate it around, and it's on. Okay. Now what we need to do is we just need to make sure that the wheel is running straight in the slot here. And all we're doing is we're checking the positioning on either side. These bolts here, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that they're tight again. Okay, they're tight up against the axle. And then we're going to check just to make sure that it's about the same amount of threading on either side, which you can see mine are even now. And that's going to help the wheel to run straight. That's for the tracking of the bike. It's also for the tracking of the belt. So it is important that we keep this straight and we have this on in the right place on either side. It also affects the brake rotor if the brake rotor is sort of moving slightly. It has to be quite a bit out in order to make a big difference. But just check these, make sure that they're right, and we should be okay. We're good now to add the axle bolts on either side here. I've got my axle bolts. I've put the protective caps on the ends of them just because it actually helps to sort of turn them on. Okay, so I can basically put them on, get them finger tight on either side. Okay, and then when they're there, I can just peel them off. Okay. Now I'm going to use my torque wrench, and I'm going to tighten these to 50 Newton meters here. So we'll just get it started. And then you can see the gauge. Okay, that's 50. Now I'm just going to place my disc brake back on. These pieces face towards the outside. The logo faces towards the inside. Okay, and we had taken this off before. And slide it into the slot. Oh, sorry, I'm going to get these off. Now remember, I was being mindful previous about where the spacers were. Okay, and they're on the back here. So I'll get this one started. Take my spacers off, put that through and put the spacers back on. And we'll get this started again. Okay, we don't need to get these really tight right now because we're going to be going through an adjustment when we flip the bike back over again. Okay, this is actually a little too tight. We want to keep this just loose enough that it still moves around, right? So you can see that I can still move the caliper because we're going to be adjusting the caliper afterwards. Now we're going to take our motor wire. All the newest bikes will have 2 of these plugs, okay? And then these 3 quick push connectors. Okay, so we're going to feed the plugs plus the push connectors through this space here in the bike. And then we can see the positioning of our motor wire. And now what we're going to do just before we flip it over is we're going to zip tie this on so that it's secure against the frame. It's easier to see from this side for most of the zip tie positions, so that's why we're going to do this just before we flip the bike over. Okay, so we've got our zip ties here, and we're just going to zip tie this along the frame. The important thing that we need to watch is that when we're doing this, we're just keeping the motor wire away from the brake rotor here, so that it's never touching the brake rotor. It's already coming out just ahead of there, so yes, the space is tight, but it is enough to basically get our motor wire on. Now, we'll rest the cable against the top of the cable stay. Okay, we're going to feed this through. This first one's important to get right and tight. Okay, and we've got that secured. Okay, the next ones you'll be able to see from here. Okay, so we've got one right here for the motor wire. Okay, and we're gonna grab the brake cable as well with this when we're doing this one. Okay, so this is the second one here. Okay, we've now got that motor cable nice and away from that brake disc. Okay, the third one is just going to be right here. Okay, that's nice and tight. We can clean these up. Okay. The fourth one is harder to see from the bottom here. I know where it is, but you may feel like you want to put this over the other side. Basically right here. Okay. Okay, and now our motor wire is in a great position. Okay, we'll click that off. Okay, and we're ready to stand the bike up on the other way. We've now got our motor wire on, our back wheels on, our front wheels on. We're in the home stretch here. Now we're just going to connect the motor wire to the controller. So we're just going to take one of these sets. It doesn't matter which one. One of them is just a redundant set in case there's ever an issue with your hall sensors. If you notice the shape of the connector, this piece here, this tab faces outwards. That's just the button for the clip. And you're just going to slide it on till you hear it click like that. Okay. And then these push connectors just line up the colors. So blue goes to blue and just basically push them on. Okay. And they should slide on fairly easily. Okay. Green to green. Yellow to yellow. Okay. And that's it. Okay, and that's going to be the same process if you're ever basically taking off the back wheel to change the flat tire, to balance the back wheel, to tighten the spokes. Any maintenance tasks that you're doing there, that will be the process in taking off the back wheel and putting it back on. Now we're just going to put the side panels back on the side because we don't need to get into here anymore. So again, being mindful of this tab, we're going to put that in first. Okay, we're going to push it straight. We want to make sure that we're not sort of like going from side to side. Okay, because that can break that tab off. Okay, and then we're just going to put our screws back in here. Okay, and we're going to do that to both sides. Now we're just going to quickly get the belt tension right. This thing's pretty easy. It's just a spring-loaded tensioner. So we're just going to push this down, slide the belt on, and that's it. Okay. You may find that you need to re-grease this, or even out of the box you've got to add some grease to it. It is sometimes squeaky. Just add a little bit of bike grease in here, assembly grease, lithium grease. Just to keep those bearings happy. But that's all that's basically keeping this belt tension, right? So, yeah, that works there. And then now we're going to put the pedals on. Okay, and you'll notice from the box that we have identified that there's a right and a left. That is important because the threading is different. The right goes on here clockwise. Okay, and the left goes on counterclockwise, and that's just so that your pedals don't loosen while you're riding. Once I've got them finger tight on either side, I'm just going to use the 15mm wrench to tighten them the rest of the way. Okay, and you do want to get these pretty tight. Okay, and we're going to do that to both sides. Remember when we put on the back brake and then we kept this somewhat loose? So what we're going to do now is we're going to position the caliper on the rear brake. Okay, so the idea is to have this like sitting in the middle so that when we let go of the brake, we've got the right space on either side of the brake pads. Now the easiest way to do this is to grab the brake handle and then tighten it up. When we're doing the rear brake here, it's sometimes easiest to have somebody else grab the front handle. But if you turn the handlebar, you can reach yourself, which is what I'm doing right here. So you can see the calipers moving in there against the disc. So we're going to position that. I'm going to squeeze the brake handle, Okay, and then I'm going to tighten the caliper against the rotor, knowing that this is now, it's usually close to the right position. Okay, I let go, and then I can kind of take a look down the inside and see if I need to make any slight adjustments. Doing this with Magura calipers is a bit of an art. Now stepping up towards the front, you'll notice that your turn signals are loose in shipping. These are pretty simple. We just put them through. We'll get them finger started here. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to hold the bolt and turn the turn signal. You can break the wire inside doing that. So we're just going to hold this and we're going to turn it on like this. Okay. And then we're going to make sure that the light is facing towards the front here. And then we're going to hold it in the place that we want and just use the 15mm wrench to tighten that up. You don't need to go too tight on these, okay? And they are meant to sort of take a hit. Same thing on both sides. See how I have this faced the wrong way? Face it towards the front. Just give it a bit of a tighten with the 15mm wrench. Okay. Then we're good. Now it's good. Remember when we put the handlebar on before? We didn't position this where we wanted it to. We just sort of got it on there. So let's loosen it off just slightly. And now we can sort of position the handlebar where it's comfortable for us. Okay, I like it here. And now get these pretty tight. Okay, and just go back over them again to make sure that they're tight. And then you can position this display almost any way that you want, in the fact that you can loosen these off and loosen the bolts on either side, and you can position the display in anywhere that you feel works best for you, right? So feel free to play around with this to get the display in the right position for you. And again, on the new bikes with the crossbar, the positioning and the position of your handlebars will take some adjustment to get it right at the right sight line for your height, for how you like to look at the display and all of that. So spend some time in getting this right before you take this out on your first ride. Okay, now that we've got the handlebar in place, want to just make sure that all the connections are connected. Sometimes in shipping these can come apart. So what I want you to do is just unzip these on either side and then just take a look to make sure that they're connected. Sometimes you'll see them apart like this, and if you do, you just need to put them back together. You'll notice that there's a little tab inside one side, and a line up for that on the other side. So you line those pieces up and just push them together, okay? And you'll notice that they're all color coded. So if this one was apart, this one's red, you notice the last one's green. So it makes it a little bit easier to find the missing pieces. So you're just gonna check either side here. So we just unzip these. Okay, we're all connected here. Okay, everything's looking good. This is connected here. Our turn signals are connected. Okay, and our headlight down here below is connected. Okay, and that's all we just need to do to make sure that those are there. Okay, last off, we're going to install the front fender. So you notice how it's not quite symmetrical. The shorter piece goes towards the front, the longer towards the back. The hardware to install this is usually either here on the front or here on the back of the triple tree. So take a look at both locations to see where the bolt is. I'm going to take the bolt and washer out. Okay. We're going to put those through. I'm just going to get it started here. Okay, and you'll notice as you're tightening this, it can be slightly off. So we want to make sure that when we've got it tight, that it's straight this way. And then also, when you've got it on there, you may find that your fender is like not tracking the shape of the wheel. We do want to make sure that it's tracking the shape of the wheel so that when the suspension moves, you're not catching either the front of the wheel or the back of the wheel on the fender. Okay, and we also want to make sure that the fender is not knocking against the bottom of the triple tree here. So you can see if we get it too close, it could hit the bottom of the triple tree and be making some noise. But this is perfect right here. Okay, so we just want to tighten that up and make sure that that's good there. The last thing we're going to do is reinstall the battery. Okay, so we're going to pick that back up, position it through the frame. Okay, sit it on the tray here. Make sure that the back side goes in first. This is where the lock is. Okay, so once that's lined up, we can lock it. Okay, and then we'll tighten the set screw up against the bottom of the battery. And this helps to make sure that the battery stays really firm in the locking plate below it. Okay, and it doesn't rattle around while you're riding. Okay, reinstall the power plug at the front. And we're all set to go. The last step that we really highly recommend is just go around to all the different bolts on the bike and make sure that everything is nice and tight. Okay? These are headlight brackets, so they don't have to be crazy tight. These bolts here, right on the triple tree, they should be very tight against the fork legs. Okay? And I'm doing this just because things do move in shipping, and it is important as the assembler to be making sure that all the bolts on your bike are tight. So go around everywhere and make sure that everything is tight as expected. Okay, and then we'll be ready for our first ride. I'm not going to show you every single bolt. Okay. So you've got the bike together now, everything's ready to go. Quick one last check. Check all those lights, make sure that they're operating properly, both the turn signals, headlights, brake light, everything's working well. Take it easy on the first run, keep it in a lower power, bed the brakes in, so don't go off to a full speed run right away. Make sure to like slowly work the brakes in because new brake pads do take a little bit of time before they're full effectiveness. So go easy on them to get going. Be safe out there, and we hope you really enjoy the bike. Thanks again. Bye-bye.